Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and I've got one of my usual Thursday Goldman Sachs Small Business 10,000 sessions in the hot seat. So we've got SarahJane Butler, we're going to bring in a second. I've been out of video contact with people for a couple of weeks, and I'll explain that a bit later, and it ties in a little bit with what we're going to talk about with SarahJane as well. So let's get SarahJane in with us. So hi SarahJane, how are you?
Hi Lee, I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the Goldman Sachs program and how it's affected you and your business. So tell us a little bit about your business prior to getting involved with the Goldman Sachs program. So what were the kind of things you were doing? You know, what did you do before the business was kicked off? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so originally I was a finance lawyer, so I never had any intention whatsoever of setting up my own business. I was effectively working in the city, working at the Magic Circle law firms, carrying out finance deals for some of our big name banks. Then when I got married and fell pregnant, I realised quickly that there was very little support really for professional women originally at the start. So we're talking about sort of 10, 11 years ago, about the amount of support there was for women and their well-being as they embarked on a journey of motherhood as well as career. And my father uttered the immortal lines, "We'll do something about it then." And that's how Parental Choice started.
That's what parents do, isn't it?
Yeah, so Parental Choice started 10 years ago in June. The aim of it, as I mentioned, was to support parents with the journey effectively from becoming pregnant to all the way through to when their children were 16. So dealing with the practical and the emotional sides, anything from separation anxiety when they go to nursery or to school, to dealing with bullying, to dealing with social stress, to deal with exams, to dealing with amount of time on your screen, dealing as a parent with the costs of childcare, for example, or helping parents manage their time between having a career and spending time with their children, and all of those things that nobody ever prepares you for. And if you're trying to run a career at the same time of looking after 2 or 3 children, then I'm sure there's many people out there who realize what a struggle it is. So that's how we started Parental Choice, and that carried on for about 2-3 years. We took on our first major corporate client, L'Oreal, about 8 years ago. And L'Oreal were fantastic because they have such a brilliant family-focused program there, and they really do their best to look after their employees. So, for example, through us, they offer everybody returning from parental leave a free childcare search, which means it's all covered. So that's an example of how we started. We then developed in about 4 or 5 years ago, we then developed to encompass elder care. So for that sandwich generation, so looking after those who had elderly relatives, those who needed to know about powers of attorney, about wills, about respite care, about sheltered housing, domiciliary care, how to recognise the signs of dementia, Alzheimer's. So really looking at how much does it really cost to have elder care? So most people think you have to sell your home and a kidney. It's really kind of looking and answering all the questions. So the reverse side of the childcare, I guess. And that brings us
the last 12 months, some of that you've talked about has been really important. So on the children's side of things, it's been very difficult for a lot of them. And I think with living their lives through social media for the last 12 months during the pandemic, I bet that's affected a lot of people's mental health as well for the children. But then that overflows into the parents as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we really look at is things like child anxiety, looking at things like eating disorders, dealing with loneliness, dealing with friendship issues. It affects both sides. And I think COVID has had such a massive impact both on parental mental health, but also child's mental health, as they haven't been able to be with their children. So those are things that we've tried to tackle as part of our services through employers to employees. And I think
I can understand a little bit around the elderly side of things because I had elderly parents who both became ill and sadly both passed away recently as well. So I've been through all that power of attorney issues and all those kind of things. So it is a real challenge to be able to do that. So you're juggling one set of balls with work, but you're also trying to spin some plates at the same time with elderly relatives, and then potentially, when when they pass away, you've got to do all the other things you've got to do afterwards legally, which can be a real challenge, and not everybody's set up to be able to do that themselves.
No, not at all. And I think it's one of these things that you don't know. It's one of life's challenges. And if you don't know how to cope with it and you haven't had experience of it before, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And if you're trying to work at the same time, it's really difficult. And I think during COVID, it has been predominantly women who have the burden upon which has fallen in terms of elder care, in terms of childcare, and therefore their career has almost taken a back seat in the last 12 months. And I think there was an article in The Guardian yesterday which was called, "We're not having a risk session, we're having a she session," in that the number of women in the workplace has fallen quite a lot. And I think part of why I set up Parental Choice in the first place was really to encourage working parents to not give up on their careers and to be able to manage both sides of things. Which brings us actually kind of up to Goldman Sachs and how it has changed, because we're no longer called Parental Choice, we're now called Your Employee Wellbeing. And that's really as a result of the Goldman Sachs program.
Well, as we're at that point then, tell us a little bit about how you found out about the Goldman Sachs program and the application process.
So I attended a wellbeing diversity session at the London Stock Exchange about 3 years ago. And I met a couple of entrepreneurs there, female entrepreneurs, who absolutely raved about the program and said, you really, really should go on it. It's been the making of our business, and the people that we've met there have been phenomenal, etc. So I looked into it, and initially I thought that my business was just going to be way too small. But again, my father said, well, go for it. You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So I did. So I applied. And first of all, almost anybody who's applying should understand that there is a massive amount of information that they require from you. They ask a great deal of questions about your finances, about your plans, about where you want to go, really about your goals, your employment plans, all of those sorts of things. So it's quite a tough exercise in terms of data recall, frankly, as I remember. And then the interview is something completely different.
Yeah, I remember the interview very well. I'm sure you do.
Well, I remember turning up at the Hilton in London and sort of sitting in a room, and it was very much like a doctor's waiting room. And then I was ushered into really what looked like sort of Dragon's Den panel. And one of the ladies who was on it was Penny Daly, who since the program has become an amazingly good friend and fantastic mentor. But I have to say, she scared me witless on the interview and really kind of grilled me.
I realised later he wasn't as bad a person as he seemed in the interview.
Well, I kind of remember just walking out and just thinking, well, yeah, okay, that was an hour I'm not going to get back of my life. In fact, ironically enough, I went from the Goldman Sachs interview to an award ceremony, which was for Entrepreneur of the Year, or Female Entrepreneur of the Year, and it was the very last award of the evening, and I was tired and I was fed up, and it was just kind of one of those days, and I just was thinking, oh bother. So I just said to my colleague, look, I'm going home. This isn't going to happen. It's not been my day today. So there I was on my way home, and as I got to my car at the car park, the phone call rang and said, actually, you've just won. I was like, oh, okay. And then a few weeks later, they called me and said, would you like to join the Goldman Sachs cohort 11, which I was completely overwhelmed by. And I have to say, it's one of the best things I've ever done.
So what year was that you started the program?
So it's 2 years ago, so September 2019.
Yeah, so that would have been one of the national programs, because
yes.
I was on the first national program. So we were the guinea pigs for the new way of doing things between the three areas, and actually going through the majority of the material online. Whereas prior to that, most people had gone into one of the universities and spent their time there throughout the months that they did it. I think it was a 6-month period they spent, going every other week. I think it was for a full day. So it was quite different, where we were doing things each week, mainly online, wasn't it? With both growth group and also with the different sections and modules that we were covering. So you kick things off. I would have thought you did a residential to start with. Where was your residential?
So the first residential we did was at Keble College in Oxford, which was amazing, really, really phenomenal. And everyone was just so nice straight off. Everyone was just, the organisation of it, everything was brilliant, from the team at Goldman's to the team at Oxford University. Everybody that I met straight away, in fact, there's people that I would consider now to be lifelong friends, were brilliant. And it was such a nice, welcoming bunch, because there just was no criticism or no prejudice. I think we were just all in the same boat, effectively. So we came from such completely different, there was like a wire mesh specialist there, to a nutritionist, to marketing, to manufacturing steel. They were just from people completely different walks of life. And so it was fascinating. It was really a great bunch of people. They're really good, great guys and girls.
We had the same, we had other IT people like ourselves. We've got a gentleman who did bespoke, furniture for both residential, and he was moving into commercial property, like settees and all sorts of bureaus and things you could make for people. We had a utility specialist who did servicing of large water pumps for the utility industry. It's just so diverse. Cake makers as well. But this was a special cake maker, which a majority of the material inside was polystyrene, she told us, because these were so you needed a lot of support at the bottom. So they use a lot of polystyrene to get the support in them. So quite interesting. So you started the program off. How did you feel then? You said you were, it was easy in the room. Everybody was, from different backgrounds, but did you get that feeling that you were a bit of a phony in the room and things, and everybody else was, a true business person, and you were just there with your play business, as it were?
I would say I was probably overawed by some of the businesses in the room. Some were definitely multi-million pound businesses, or getting that way. And we're still quite a small business, we're quite niche and bespoke in what we do. So there was definitely an element of, there's people here who are far more successful than me and are going places. My growth group, one particular guy I have to do a call out for is a guy called Casper Rose, who runs a business now called Fresh Fitness Food. And that, just watch out. It's the next Deliveroo, it's the next Just Eat. He's just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And there's plenty of other businesses. There's Austin Smart, who runs a brilliant DJ, has brought music to schools and so on and so forth. There were some amazingly talented people. So there was definitely an element of, there's people on here who are much better than me. But at the same time,
yes, that feeling from time to time, when they start the program, it's quite a common theme.
Yeah, I think. But then, having said that, I think everybody had their own skills in different ways. So and there wasn't anybody who was kind of lording it over anybody else. It was quite clear that actually we were all in it for the same purpose, and actually to help each other. There wasn't anybody there who was an ego. There was no egos, I would say, probably. There were some loud people, don't get me wrong, and they were very, very funny, but there was no egos.
People are quite extroverts, aren't they?
Yes.
But, then let's talk about the modules then. So which of the modules did you find the most beneficial to you personally, and also to the business?
I'd say the finance ones were probably the best. So finance and kind of sales, in terms of sales strategy, was probably the best. So as I mentioned earlier, my background is in law, and I actually, when I set up the business, I retrained into employment and commercial law. So the legal HR side of things was was very straightforward and was just in effect revision. But the finance side is something that I'm not that way inclined. I'm not very mathematical.
Numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something to do with numbers. It's just my head of finance here at Your Employee Wellbeing always laughs at me, because whenever there's a discussion about numbers, she always says, "Please don't let SarahJane talk. Honestly, she'll just get it all wrong."
Window, I'm getting a bit warm, so in the room, so just let it get fresh.
Yeah, so I'd say the finance side was fascinating, and also very much kind of looking at the sales strategy, the sales process, the no pain, no gain elements to it. The Simon Sinek view of in the videos that he did were, to me, probably the best sides of it. But I think there was something that, as I said, I think there was just something there for everybody, because there were people there who clearly were fantastic at the finance side, but equally didn't know anything about the HR legal side. And I think doing the business plan was a real eye opener for me.
I think
I've never done it as detailed as that.
Area that we covered, which I wasn't that familiar with, the social responsibility side, and that's not something that's commonly taught in a lot of these, like mini MBAs. It's all about the business, isn't it? Whereas some of the social responsibility, now you can weave social responsibility through your business, so you can actually give back to the community. Is really interesting as well, and that was one of the modules I thought was quite interesting in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think they had a whole different impact, really, from pure business. It was very much a kind of, your employees. It was definitely focused on how you could help the different communities. So the one within your business, and then the one immediately outside, and then further on.
So you've learned new things, finance, one thing, how to add a couple of numbers together, and also you learned a little bit about the sales strategy side of things. So how did you take that learning and implement it within the business, and how did you implement it within your own, personal development?
So each time I came back from a residential, I sat down with my management team, and we literally went through pretty much what I had learned. I think they were probably sick of it by the time I finished, because they were so fed up. Yeah, they were like, "Oh, she's talking about the course again. Oh God, not Goldman's again." So I think they still raise their eyebrows when I go, "Oh yes, I met that person on the Goldman's course." No, I came back, and we did a lot of sort of brainstorming, a lot of thinking around our strategy, about where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do in the next sort of 12 months to 2 years. We really kind of sat down and tried to focus on, because the business has sort of expanded, but maybe had expanded beyond its reach, really. And actually it was sort of taking it back to its core and really figuring out, because I think a lot of businesses grow too quickly and then don't know what to do about it. And we were on the verge of doing that, of sort of being jack of all trades, but master of none. So it was really about, how do we pull ourselves back together? How do we sit and focus on what we really are good at and what we need to do? And how do we scale the business up so that we can be that next £1 million business? And that was all great. And the business plan was all set up to do that. And then, of course, we hit COVID. So that was a whole different bunch.
Well, before we move on to COVID and how that's affected things, that one of the biggest parts of the Goldman Sachs program is the alumni as well. So the alumni events. I wouldn't have thought you'd been able to go to many of them because of what's happened. Whereas, I went through the program 5 years ago. So we were going to events in London, events in Birmingham. There were also events held up in Leeds as well, so that you could go to on different subject matter, usually with some great, food and drink afterwards, and a social atmosphere somewhere. So I think we went to one was at the British Museum. There's been a number of them that have been really good. I think there's been a couple of online events. I'm not sure if you got a chance to go to any of those.
Yeah, I've done a number of the online events and a number of the sort of tutorials, but also the emergency coaching one-to-ones. And they've all been really, really helpful. There was a sort of part coaching / seminar that was done last summer, which was very useful. And again, I met some great people on there. I think we've got a very active WhatsApp group amongst our cohort. My group So, shout out to them. So Dave, Seb, Casper and Andres, we try and keep in contact with each other on a regular basis, even just to see how each other's doing. And it's been really good. I mean, I think obviously we miss not seeing everybody, and it was weird because we were together for 3 months and it was very intense 3 months. And then we graduated in January of 2020. And then of course, come March, we all went into lockdown. So I think we all miss each other a lot, I think, because we made such good friendships between it. But actually the WhatsApp has kept us going in the meantime.
So coming on to the actual COVID piece itself. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your business and you personally then? And how has the Goldman Sachs program helped in any way with that?
So when we finished the Goldman Sachs program and my business plan, I had already chosen to pivot away from the purely childcare or elder care side of the business. I actually had decided to link it up anyway. And there were 2 main elements to my business plan. The first one was bringing employee care to SMEs, because a lot of SMEs cannot afford it or don't have the time to put in place a wellbeing strategy. And I think for small businesses, much more than larger businesses, if you have a man or woman down because of life's challenges, then they can be disproportionately affected by it. And so my main thing was really bringing employee care to SMEs or people with 100 employees or less. So that was my first goal. And the second goal was really to join the dots between childcare and elder care and make it into your employee wellbeing. And your employee wellbeing is entirely designed to go from the day you start work to the day you finish work, and look at all of the things that may affect you on that journey. So anywhere between 20 to 70, really what is going to hit you in those 50 years. And that can be anything. I mean, it's anything from fertility to bereavement. And it's anything financial, whether it's buying your own house or writing your own will, dealing with your pension, dealing with separation and divorce, so relationship issues, dealing with cancer or heart problems or whatever. And I don't mean that from a medical point of view, but if somebody in your family is affected by that, how do you then respond emotionally and mentally to that news and that information? Again, it's all children's side of things. So it's, how do you cope with having children and how do you cope with having elderly relatives? And people say, the first most 5 stressful things that can happen in your life is a death, birth of a child, moving house, etc. So you kind of think, as an employer, if somebody's going through that, they are not going to be focusing on work. They're not going to be focusing on what they need to do. And that's really, as we hit COVID last year, that was what my goal was. And I would say for the first 6 months from March last year, we pretty much carried on. So we built our entire employee care platform for small businesses. And I think if we had finished COVID there, then I probably would have said, what's all the fuss been about? And I probably would have said, oh, it's been absolutely fine, because we launched Your Employee Care September time. So before we went into the sort of second lockdown. And then, of course, we went into the third lockdown. And it's been, the last 6 months has been very different to the first 6 months.
Yeah.
Not because the interest is not there, but because people are a lot more wary about spending money. And even though they understand that well-being is absolutely vital, it's whether they are prepared to put their money where their mouth is. Yeah. Because there's so many other things.
Times, isn't it? You've got to think, if my business is struggling financially because my income's dropped because of what's happening and all these other things, I'm still trying to keep my employees on, even though I've got the furlough scheme to support some of that. I may have quite a lot of outgoings still. Do I really want to increase my outgoings by another amount, just for that benefit? So, but coming back to I spoke at the beginning about I've been out of contact with a lot of people for the last couple of weeks, and we met through the first part of it. It's my mother was sadly taken with COVID-19 and died about 8-9 weeks ago now, at the beginning of February. But my father also been diagnosed with lung cancer, and it was a very aggressive small cell cancer. So we were delayed in getting him any treatment because of my mother having COVID, him being on his own. So I went through all these things you're talking about, trying to organise care for him at home. I live in Birmingham. He lived in near Rotherham in South Yorkshire. Organising, things like simple things like my mother wasn't there to make him a meal, and my father could make bread and jam and maybe beans on toast if he had a pop-up toaster. That was his limit. So you don't think that someone's been like, my parents have been together for 64 years. They were a single unit. Without one or the other, they didn't operate. My father could feed himself. We also had issues because of the cancer and things. He couldn't walk very well as well. So there were other issues in that. But again, we went through all that process of getting a lasting power of attorney for both health and finance, because I knew there was something would happen within 6 to 12 months, because the type of cancer it was. They told us be lucky to last 3 months without any treatments, and lucky to last 6 to 12 months if he did have treatment. So, I can understand, what a lot of people go through in this respect. Also, coming back to my early years, I was a single parent with 3 children for a while. So I've seen how difficult it is to look after 3 children and hold down a full-time job. And I was in the forces. I was in the RAF as a flight simulator engineer, and working shifts, which was a real challenge with 3 young children. So
I can imagine.
I call it character building.
Well, I think, well, but I think it's really difficult, because I think it's one of these things that can spiral so very, very quickly. And it's really, I think we talked earlier about the social responsibility aspect of the Goldman's course, but I do think there's a moral and ethical duty that employers have, where if they expect us to work the hours that they expect us to work and to give 50 odd years of our life to working, then actually they also have a moral and ethical duty to actually look after us. And I know that might sound very sort of utilitarian and sort of communist in that sort of sense. That's not what I mean. But I mean, there's a sort of the companies are beginning to wake up to the fact that actually it takes more than just a salary and private medical insurance, or gym membership, or whatever it might be, or cycle to work schemes. Is that really the amount of money and training and effort that you put in when you take on somebody? If that person then falters through no fault of their own because of outside circumstances, the quicker you can support them both mentally and physically, the quicker they will be able to be more productive and creative. And equally, the more loyal they will be. So it's actually, people say, well, what's the return on investment and on well-being? And I would turn around and say, well, actually, your employees are by far the greatest asset that you have, because without your employees, you're not going to be going anywhere. And how good you are as an organization really depends on how good your people are. And they say, a good leader is somebody who has people around him who are better than he or she is, because they can then take the business forward. And I think that we work with small businesses and very large businesses. And I think it's really a case of saying to somebody, well, if you can at least signpost somebody to the help that they need when it comes to fertility or bereavement or single parenthood or any of those things, you're actually taking the first step to providing that support network, which is not around, actually, unfortunately, for so many people. And there's a lot of benefits and a lot of rewards. And I think this probably comes on to something else I learned from the Goldman's program, is that we have these business plans and business strategies in place, but actually, do you have a well-being strategy in place? And that might be a bit of a weird thing to ask, but actually, if you think about buying machinery, or you're buying the latest tech, and so take your job, for example. So if you take the latest tech that you've got and the latest IT, and you spend money on it, you're investing in top-notch results. It's exactly the same with an employee. If you take the employee and you invest in it and look after that employee, then actually you will get much better results than if you kind of just treat them as a PAYE number and don't respond to their ups and their downs, because overall what you put in, you will get back. So definitely. I think that's something that Goldman's really taught me.
Yeah, and following on with my little story about my parents, as you know, my father died just over 2 weeks ago, and the first week after that, I could not do anything. You know, I was a real mess with it and couldn't sleep and things. And it was lucky that the rest of the guys in the business could pick things up and carry on without me, because I was just not able to do anything for at least a week, and then the second week I didn't really have the drive to do anything. I think it was just really difficult, and I had things to do as well to sort things out, because there is a lot to do when somebody dies. It's unbelievable how much paperwork is involved, and understanding where to go to do it. I had the benefit that I'd done it 5 weeks before, so I knew what to do. But again, it's difficult. It really is difficult, because it's someone that you care about you're doing. It's not as if you're just doing it as a job and it's just a number, like you say, POE number if it was an employee, or it's just someone you're doing a piece of work for. If it's someone, one of your loved ones, it's difficult to go through it. And simple little things can trigger real emotion. I was watching, two things kicked me off last week. I went to a funeral of a family friend, and who's a little bit younger than my father, but he died of a similar thing, lung cancer. And I just went there, and they got the flowers outside the front before they went off to the crematorium, and it said "Dad in flowers," and I was in bits. Just looking at and seeing that, it was just emotionally, it was just flooded in. It was just too much. And then at the weekend, I just fancied an old film. I watched Brastoff, if you remember Brastoff, for the colliery band and all that. And he sat on the bench in the hospital, and this woman comes along and says, "Is this man bothering you?" And he says, "Of course he's bothering me. It's my old man." And that set me up again. Little things like that, just become very emotional and quite debilitating for a little while. So if that was an employee, I wouldn't want them to feel unsupported in it. It's quite important that they've got that. So where is the business going from here then? So you've got you onto your new track of this employee well-being program, focus at small businesses. How is that going to take you forward? What's the future for your business and yourself?
So I think we've almost seeing the whole COVID period as a little hiatus. I mean, I think what it has done is enabled us to gather even more content and even more information. And we have well over 150, nearly 200 fact sheets on all forms of financial, social, physical, and emotional well-being. We have some amazing speakers, for example, Dr. Alan Johnston, who's one of the psychiatrists to the British Olympic team, Victoria Gosling, who was the chief executive of Invictus Games. We have some amazing speakers and some amazing people who can really talk about, stress, resilience, all of those kind of elements that we're having to face on a day-to-day basis now. And so our plan is going forward is sort of twofold. On the one hand is continuing to deliver bespoke wellbeing services to larger organizations. So it's really tailored to them and their demographic and who their people are, and really making sure that actually the benefits they have in place for the well-being of their team are actually used. Because you'd be surprised about the number of things that people buy because they think, oh, well, everybody else has got it, so I'll get it. And then it's never used because people are just not engaging. One of the things
we call that shelfware. They think they're going to buy it, they've got to buy it. They put it on the shelf and they never utilize it.
Yeah, exactly.
A piece of software, a piece of hardware doesn't happen. It's shelfware in our terms in IT.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly that. It's, for example, people say, well, I must get emergency childcare in. But if you're a company that's promoting flexible working and, home working, etc., then that doesn't really work. So why are you paying lots of money for something that doesn't match with your culture or your values of your company? And it's that sort of thing. So we've developed a wellbeing strategy consultancy service, which really looks at what do you really need, frankly, what do your teams really need, and are they really using it, and are you getting value for money? And then really developing that wellbeing program for people, and really looking at sort of completing the circle in terms of, okay, you've got your salary, you've got your gym membership, you've got your car, or you've got your private medical insurance, but actually where are the gaps, and where do you need support, and where can we provide signposting and education and learning and practical help and tips? So that's sort of the main focus of where we're going. And then the second part of it is really the SMEs and making sure that we're really helping those businesses that have anything from 5 employees all the way up to 100 employees, to make sure they're really getting the benefit of the same thing, really. Because just because you're a small business with 20 people doesn't mean that your people aren't going through the same issues or challenges. It just means that maybe you have a little less money than the L'Oreals or the CBREs of this world. So that's our focus. I mean, our focus is really to try and make a difference. And that's our slogan, is make a difference. Because it's amazing how, I mean, I think Tesco's have nicked this already, so I can't use it, but every little helps. and I think for an employer, you'd be amazed at what you can do at a lower price. You don't have to be spending a vast amount of money to make a difference.
Well, a couple of things then. So I do these videos for really 3 things. One, it gives me some more content to talk about what I do as well, which I'm going to come on to a little while about an event we're doing on the 21st. Secondly, we look to promote your business. So what I'd like to do is just put up a couple of things. So one thing that you mentioned was this wellbeing strategy in dealing with life challenges. And I think that's a critical thing for a lot of business to be able to understand. So if anybody out there is going through, some looking at the business and thinking about the employees, and a lot of this resonates that we've discussed, this is definitely for you. But if you need to contact SarahJane Butler. You can get to her via the website, which is youremployeewellbeing.co.uk. Also, the telephone number, 0208 979 6453, and I'll leave that on the screen for a little while. I'll also post it into the LinkedIn piece afterwards, so people have got that. And I'll also put a link to the video and also your contact details into the Goldman Sachs application afterwards as well, because we all communicate through that app, don't we? And people a little bit more about things. So I'll put those on there as well. But the other thing is I want to promote the program. I think it's such a great thing that we need to tell more people about it. And every year we've got at least 2 different cohorts kicking off and going through. So, hopefully what you've heard from SarahJane and from myself about the program will inspire you to apply and go there. I'm not sure what the entry criteria is financially. Now, it was £250,000 and the business had to operate for 3 years. What was the criteria when you was it the same?
Yeah, it is the same. And actually, can I just re-emphasize everything you've just said there, Lee, because I think it is one of the best programs I have ever done. I absolutely rate it 100%. I mean, not just for I'm slightly jealous of anyone who did it for 6 months, because I could have quite happily done it for another 3. It was absolutely phenomenal. The people on it were great.
To do it again,
maybe I could. That would just be so good. So much fun. It was a lot of fun. It was really useful. It taught me a huge amount. It really, I mean, as I said, I'm a lawyer by trade, but it really taught me. You talked about it earlier as being like a mini MBA, and I think it is that. But I think the one thing you get out of it, far more than just the 3 months, is the camaraderie and the network that provides the alumni network. I think anybody who's an entrepreneur, and I tell anybody this, is that they'd be a fool not to try and go for it, because it's been really one of the things I would 100% recommend to anybody to do.
Yeah, me too. Excellent thing, even for your own personal development as well as the benefits you get from a business perspective. Coming on to our business, we're starting a new thing. We've kicked off a business called Eventally, and what we're trying to do is promote the use of video like we're doing today. And a lot of people don't have the skills to do the technology or pull together what you need to do for these kind of live streams. So Eventally is helping organizations large and small to be able to do live stream videos into LinkedIn, YouTube, and also into places like Facebook, depending on where your customers are. We're also doing live events, so we can do anything from a few hours up to 3 or 4 days, and we're using a specific platform that we can actually deliver this really effectively and quickly. Our first event that we're running is for our own business from Eventally, so we're using Eventally to actually do an event for our own business on the 21st of April, which is all focused around digital transformation. And a lot of people don't know know what that means in the small business world, but it's 88% of chief execs in larger enterprise businesses believe that's where they're going to invest majority of their funds this year, going forward, because it really makes a difference, especially when you've been through something like the pandemic, where you really need to make contact with your customers more effectively, but also smooth out the way that business is done, and take out some of that manual and paper process. And the idea of digital transformation is to create that interface that's digital between you and your customers, and then also link up all your employees and the processes into the back of that. And they see that as being a critical thing. So our first event is based on talking around digital transformation, how you can implement that within your business as well. Thank you very much, SarahJane, for joining me today. I think
Thank you.
I enjoyed our chat. It's amazing how 40 minutes go so quickly. Yeah,
yes, I didn't realise that was on.
About this. They think, oh, I'll be able to talk about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and 40 minutes flies by, doesn't it? Because it's a shared experience. It's something that we've enjoyed. We've all got something out of it, and also we're trying to give back as well. So it really goes really quickly and very easy to go through. So I'm going to shut down the broadcast now. Have you any final words you want to tell people before we disappear?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Lee, for asking me to come and do this. It's been great. As I said, 100% recommend the Goldman program. But I probably will sort of close on one thing is really, as an employer, and I employ 12 people myself, is really to think about your employee well-being. And I don't mean that in terms of my business, I mean your employee well-being, because it is really important as we come out of lockdown and people will return to the workplace, that people feel psychologically safe and secure. Don't underestimate your employee well-being. Don't underestimate what they've been through in the last year. It really will pay dividends in the long run when you stop and take 5-10 minutes to care about how they are and what they're going through in their lives. And you won't be sorry. It's something that you will see on your bottom line make a massive difference.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. Well, thank you very much, SarahJane. We will speak again soon, and good luck with the business.
Thanks, Lee. Take care. Bye, everybody.